Marvel's teeny little super guy comes to the big screen for the first time after nearly a decade of development hell. Was it worth the wait? Johnnie Torch gives you the long and short of it. See what I did there? Oh boy. First, a little history, aka my Hank Pym rant. Hank Pym has gotten the rawest of raw deals in the MCU. The guy was a founding Avenger, but he and Wasp were omitted from the film because Edgar Wright and Kevin Feige had a deal long before the MCU took off that Wright would make the Ant-Man movie. So the pressure was off Wright at that point, and he wrote the version he wanted to see based on the story To Steal an Ant-Man, which had Scott Lang as the Ant-Man picking up the legacy from Hank Pym. But the film, having been in development hell under Wright since the Truman administration, was taking too long. Avengers came and went with nary a word about Pym's absence, since Pym and Wasp were still being held hostage by Wright's delays, and Phase 2 was winding down, with little hope of Ant-Man being made. To make matters worse, Pym's only other claim to fame, the creation of Ultron, was now being handed off to Tony Stark in the rapidly approaching Age of Ultron. Eventually, Marvel parted ways with Wright to finally get the ball rolling. Marvel cited creative differences, but were generally keeping the concept the same of Lang being Ant-Man and Pym being an old man. This is really a tragedy for Hank Pym, who deserved so much better. He really deserved to be part of the MCU in a big way, not as a side character. He's one of the great flawed heroes in Marvel's canon. They basically took the only things the character was known for and attributed them to others. The only thing left to him now was the wife-beater albatross he's been wearing around his neck for 30-odd years. I wouldn't be surprised if Marvel feared making a hero out of Pym for that reason alone, because one panel 30-odd years ago somehow ingrained itself so much in the public mind when it comes to Pym that they'd rather not fight that conception and just marginalize the character instead. If that's the case, it's a sad and gutless choice. So with my reservations firmly in hand, what about the movie? Did it deliver? Well, let's get right to it. The film starts out in 1989 with a younger Hank Pym leaving S.H.I.E.L.D. over there trying to use his Pym particles against his wishes. We get some awesome cameos from Peggy Carter, played by Hayley Atwell, and Howard Stark, played by the older Howard Stark actor from Iron Man 2, John Slattery. They use some very convincing CGI effects to de-age Michael Douglas considerably for the scene. Flash forward to the present, where Pym's former student and current nemesis Darren Cross, Corey Stoll playing a great unhinged villain, has finally unlocked the secrets of Pym's shrinking technology. Pym plans to foil him, but needs someone to step into the Ant-Man suit that he left behind years ago. Enter Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, providing a good mix of charm and humor, making Scott a likable guy to root for. He's a recently released Robin Hood-style thief who has been having a tough time getting back on his feet and keeping a job with his criminal record. This causes him grief from his ex-wife and her boyfriend when he tries to visit his adorable 6-year-old daughter, Cassie. Pym lures him back to stealing via an elaborate ruse. After using some impressive MacGyver methods to break into Pym's safe, Scott finds the Ant-Man suit and steals it, only to be arrested. Pym then offers to spring him if he agrees to be the Ant-Man, and steal Cross's Yellow Jacket suit, which is a weaponized version of the Ant-Man suit. The early scenes are probably the weakest. I wasn't looking forward to more jail scenes after Guardians of the Galaxy, but despite the dramatic-looking trailer, the brief jail scene is played for laughs. The beginning scenes kind of reminded me of a cross between the first Iron Man movie and the Green Lantern movie. A mixture of somewhat bland family relations with the ne'er-do-well protagonist, intercut with the villain's machinations. It's somewhat slow-moving at first, and I don't think that's entirely the fault of it being an origin movie, as some have said. Frankly, the origin is usually my favorite part. Once Scott is on board, there are several great training scenes where Hank teaches him how to use the suit and how to communicate with the ants to do his bidding. Even if you despise ants, the scenes with them are really good. Hard to believe they can make an ant endearing, but when Scott names his flying ant Antony, he's like Silver to his Lone Ranger. It's also pretty fascinating to see how the different variety of ants work together, and what their different purposes are that help the hero. It's not done in a boring way, but it's nice to know that some thought went into the story instead of a one-size-fits-all mentality regarding the ants. The shrinking effects are spectacular, and are a tremendous update to the old Honey, I Shrunk the Kids look of oversized props and so forth. The later flying scene of Scott on Antony zooming through Cross's factory evoked the Falcon going through the second Death Star. Just stunning effects work all around. As someone greatly concerned that Pym was not getting his due in the MCU, this film did right by him as much as possible. Michael Douglas gives a great performance, which of course, great actor that he is, was never in doubt. The highlight of the film is probably his estranged relationship with his daughter, Hope Van Dyne, played by the lovely Evangeline Lilly. Hope spies on Cross's progress with the shrinking technology in an effort to help Hank keep it from falling into the wrong hands. But despite her being the perfect candidate for the Ant-Man suit, Hank's refusal of her wearing it makes her resentful. This leads to some funny clashes between her and Lang as she attempts to train him. Without doubt, my favorite scene between the two happens in a car when Lang explains the only reason he gets to wear the suit is because he's expendable to Hank, while she's not. There's a powerful theme at work here of fathers trying to do right by their daughters at all costs, and the film is more rich for it. Eventually it's revealed that Hank's wife Janet, aka the original Wasp, gave her life as a superheroine by shrinking to the subatomic level, which is what caused Hank to keep Hope from the costume. Lots of great setup in this film that can be taken in any direction. A film on Hank and Janet as secret heroes is a good possibility. Trying to find Janet in that realm is another. I appreciate them not giving Hope the Wasp outfit until the after-credits scene. As much as I'm dying to see her in action, this is really Ant-Man's movie, and he needed to be established first. I'm not a fan of Wasp wearing the same Ant-Man mask, though. I hope Hope loses that. If there's one other minor negative I might have with the film, it's that there's little action until the final act. One brief scene is the exception, where Scott attempts to break into the Avengers headquarters to get a device that they'll need. This leads to a confrontation with Falcon, played by the ever-enjoyable Anthony Mackie. It's easy to imagine that this scene was something Edgar Wright may have objected to, and Marvel insisted on. It basically serves to give some much-needed action whilst getting Ant-Man acquainted with the Avengers, for his imminent inclusion in next year's Civil War. This is a good time to mention the magnificent after-credits tag with Falcon, Cap, and Bucky. I must make mention of Scott's thieving buddies that provide most of the film's laughs. The fast-talking Luis, a standout performance by Michael Pena, Dave the getaway driver, and Kurt the tech whiz. These guys are a joy when they're on screen, and they don't overstay their welcome. They make up for whatever lack of action there might be in the film's first half. Cross doesn't don the Yellow Jacket costume until late in the game. Ironically, it's the suit Pym wore in the comics when he struck Janet in that one scene that seems to unfairly define him these days. Yellow Jacket makes for a fearsome foe, and I like Cross being a somewhat disturbed individual. We don't get told in detail just what he's done to himself via experimentation to get that way. One of the things people seem to criticize Marvel on is their villains being not too deeply written by and large. While I can see that being something of an issue in a few cases, Yellow Jacket seems justifiable in his villainy. He holds a grudge against Hank as his mentor for not giving him his birthright. He also seems to have a thing for Hope that's left in between the lines for the most part. The film's climax is fought in Scott's daughter's room, making it probably the most unique battleground in superhero film history. This leads to some very funny visuals, particularly of a toy train. In the end, everyone lives happily ever after. The film is perhaps the most family-friendly superhero film Marvel has done since Thor. There are some noteworthy cameos. One we've come to expect by the great Stan the Man Lee. His probably holds the record for one latest in the game for a Marvel movie. Another funny one that might have went over most people's heads is where Garrett Morris shows up as a cabbie. Some will remember Garrett as the only live-action Ant-Man actor from his sketch on the classic SNL. Now I really want to see those Nicholas Hammond, Rex Smith, and Eric Kramer cameos. This is the final film in Marvel's Phase 2. Going forward, this franchise has so much potential. It would be criminal if it doesn't get its own legitimate sequel. Fortunately, Marvel has just announced that a full-fledged sequel titled Ant-Man and the Wasp has been set for July 6, 2018. The film ends hinting at a romance between Hope and Scott, which would make them the equivalent of yesteryear's Hank and Janet. Granted, Scott's not temperamental and Hope's not flighty, which is probably exactly what Marvel wants. Some have said that a romance between Hope and Scott seems rushed, but I appreciate the natural progression in their relationship. Hope seeing Scott as an adversary, then an ally, then a friend, and maybe more. That's the way the best relationships usually are, multi-layered. Overall, it's a very fun film whose few flaws are not too difficult to overlook. They have a great future ahead of them, and I'm looking forward expectantly to the sequel. Until then, on to the beginning of Phase 3 with Civil War. I'm giving Ant-Man 4 out of 5 stars. This is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.